President Barack Obama chose Pittsburgh as the host for the G20 summit, we've gotten global attention for our story of economic, environmental, and quality of life transformation, the Pittsburgh comeback. Well, what's it take for a region to adapt, to change, and to thrive? Dr. Kathryn Foster is director of the UB Regional Institute and professor of urban and regional planning at the University at Buffalo State University of New York. And welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Welcome to Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Thank you. I love Pittsburgh.
Oh, that's good to hear. Well, hopefully we're a resilient region since you've been studying them all across the country, right?
Well, you know, if you were really to ask somebody what does it take to be resilient, if we were doing it at a personal level, I'd say, well, Bill, you know, you got to get 8 hours of sleep a night and exercise and eat your fruits and vegetables, and probably would make some sense to get a college degree and know how to use a computer, something like that. And so what we've been grappling with is how do you tell those stories for a region, a metropolitan place? You know, what does it take to be resilient?
And how do you describe resilience? What does resilience mean?
Oh, it's got so many meanings, but what we've been using with the sense of regions is that notion of bounce back. You know, when you're given a stress or a strain or a shock, whether it's an acute shock like a hurricane or an earthquake or, God forbid, a terrorist attack, then how do you recover from that thing? And then there are these other kinds of chronic strains or stresses that might be like economic transformation or environmental change, climate change, let's say. How do you recover from those? So there are different kinds of shocks that you might imagine, but our notion of resilience is very much, do you bounce back from that, and how well do you recover from being in that position of having that strain. So
what does a region have to be prepared for those kinds of crises or shocks?
Well, we've come up with a set of ideas about that, whether people think these are the right ones. But for example, there are certain aspects or elements of the regional economy that we think would be important for being more or less resilient. If you're more diversified in terms of your economy, just like being in the stock market and having a more diversified portfolio as opposed to putting all your eggs in one stock basket. So diversification, a sense of your size of your economy, your gross metropolitan product and how well it's been growing, a sense on the regional economy side of your affordability and the degree to which people aren't feeling too vulnerable to their economy at any time. In other words, I have a sense that I'm doing okay in this region, things like that. And then there is a whole series of what you might call socio-demographic characteristics of capacity. So to the degree that your population has relatively high educational attainment or is without disability. Disability can be a real challenge in the moment of a crisis, especially if you need to move somewhere or be transported somewhere. To the degree to which your population has health insurance. It may sound kind of strange, but that gives you a sense of a foundation. You're not as vulnerable to an economy when you have health insurance, something like that. And of course, the degree to which your population is out of poverty. In the moment of any kind of a crisis, the degree to which you have resources or means you could draw upon in order to address that crisis is important. And then a third category we've been working with has to do with the connection to a community, your connection to place, not only connection in terms of, let's say, the ability to communicate, but also in terms of your identification with or your familiarity with that place. So that in the moment of a crisis, if you needed to get instructions or somehow be connected to your neighbors and make sure that there's a camaraderie of recovery in that sense, how connected are you to a place? So when you put all those things together, you say, well, a place that had all of those things would probably be in the best place we could imagine to have good capacity to be resilient for this unknown future crisis that may happen.
Interesting. So yeah, almost no matter what you throw at it, a place that has all those attributes would be able to weather the storm better. Yeah, I'm thinking about Pittsburgh,
Sure.
30 years ago, not very diverse economy, right. Now fairly diverse. Some decent structures in place in the community. Could do better on economic disparity, but not doing bad.
Yep.
And strong sense of community, one of the
Yep.
great strengths of this region. So I would think, on balance, we're reasonably resilient?
Well, first of all, I need to let the viewers know that we did not talk before about this because you just came up with a really good summary of how Pittsburgh did. When we took a look at how Pittsburgh Metro was doing, we found that in terms of economy, in general, because of some of the disparities and also the how well it's been performing, that it was about in the middle of the pack for all 360 or so metropolitan regions in the country. So let's say you're a medium capacity for resilience in terms of your regional economic capacity. On the socio-demographic side, again thinking of the entire metropolitan region, you were better than average. You actually had high capacity for the region as a whole. I think it's something like 72nd or something like that in the country relative to 360 metros. and you were the most resilient in terms of your community connection. Indeed, Pittsburgh, there's a strong sense of stability in the area. Home ownership is relatively high. Voter participation is high. The degree to which people are connected to this place called Pittsburgh. So all in all, you had very high capacity for resilience. Now, I should say that that doesn't mean that when the next crisis comes, you'll automatically do well. It does mean that Pittsburgh is relatively well positioned compared to other metropolitan regions to be resilient in the case of a stress.
Only a few seconds left. I'm wondering, so who are the real stars of resilience then around the country?
The largest metros that came out well in that model were Minneapolis, St. Paul, had very high resilience capacity, and so did Washington, D.C. Those were the two large metros that came out well. But I will say that in general, smaller places, college towns do well, in part because of the nature of the variables we chose. And you could obviously complain about the variables we chose, but also wonder, how we put it together. But for the most part, those were the places that did well.
Well, if people want to dig deeper, can they find this online somewhere, or how do they find out more?
Well, I just gave a lecture this morning at the Gispia down at the University of Pittsburgh, and I understand they're putting both my slides and my lecture online. So if you go to the Innovation Clinic, a center now called Center for Metropolitan Studies at University of Pittsburgh, I understand that within the next few days they'll be putting that information online.
Very cool. Look for it. Dr. Kathryn Foster, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, a twist on leadership development in our region with a new approach to mentoring up-and-coming women. Stay with us.